Blume Edit. The Blume Edit. The Blume Edit. The Blume Edit. The Blume Edit.
You're listening to The Blume Edit, where we talk all things beauty, business, and being unfiltered. I'm your host, Kia, from Blume Aesthetics. Today's guest is a powerhouse in the aesthetics industry. From launching one of WA's first Laser Clinics Australia franchises in Joondalup to now leading as a business development manager at Fresh Clinics. She's seen the industry from every angle and she's not slowing down. Aniella Leeks, welcome to the Blume Edit.
Thank you, Kia. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Is this your first podcast that you've been on before?
It is, and I'm excited to help support you the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, it's nice to have you here as a guest. Let's take it back to the beginning. So what inspired you to open a Laser Clinics Australia in Joondalup?
I've always been in the aesthetics space, having been a personal trainer before, and it's all about looking good, feeling good. I've worked in aesthetics clinics, so it was only natural for me to progress into owning my own aesthetics clinic. So Laser Clinics had disrupted the market over East, and it was a growing opportunity for Laser Clinics to come over to Western Australia. Yeah, I was the first to open. I originally opened in Midland and then had my own space at Lakeside Joondalup.
That's so cool. It's such an achievement, hey?
Thank you.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced as a new clinic owner and how did you overcome them?
First and foremost, probably staff is a really big one, and I think everyone can relate to that. So just, managing staff, and I guess making sure that we had a really good flow of new and existing customers. So that was really important. It's one thing to offer exceptional service, but it's another to actually maintain. Managing the financial side of the business, so managing cash flow, was really important and something that I really had to get my head around. So it's all about inventory control. You know, when you've got a month that you've got a double pay, PAYG, BAS, a big, supplier bill, managing those things were crucial, I guess, to the performance of the business. So that was a really big challenge for me and something that I had to really learn fast.
Did you have any experience clinically, apart from, you said you did PT in fitness, did you have any sort of medical, any background in that? You just sort of jumped in the deep end?
No, I jumped in the deep end. So I didn't have any experience at all. My husband and I, own another franchise, so we had that, I guess.
So you have experience owning a franchise, not necessarily, absolutely. I guess you can own a franchise in anything. You don't necessarily have to have that as your niche. The franchise in itself was essentially your niche, really, wasn't
correct.
And then you built up, but you probably found a passion in aesthetics.
Yeah,
right?
and a lot of those foundations that you have owning an existing franchise, you can transfer that information into another business.
So in your new role, with Fresh Clinics, what are some of the key strategies you plan on using to support other people's clinic growth?
I guess leaning on my experience as a clinic owner and really delving deep into other clinics or members' businesses and helping them support and grow. I think when you're really close to a business, sometimes you might miss opportunities that perhaps I can see that maybe you can't. So looking at, the number of treatments, treatment protocols, having a look at how many clients were, walking through the door, all of those things I can really help support clients.
And now you're kind of on the outside looking in, so you can see the whole picture, whereas like you said, probably for me, I'm a good example. I'm in it and I can sort of see, I've probably got tunnel vision. Maybe I concentrate on one area like getting more clients through the door and you're probably like, no, it's about the long-term clients or something like that. So you can at least see from the outside looking in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And particularly, I guess for you, you've got other staff, you've got other injectors. And I think behind closed doors, what's happening, and, we can really sit down and have a look at how many clients they're seeing, what areas that they're treating. They might only be treating, for example, the glabella, and perhaps, they, would be better off, or there's an opportunity for them to treat other areas, or maybe they're just, treating to what the client is requesting as opposed to giving them a whole treatment journey, and being able to build on that, or offering them skin treatments or skin products as well. So it's just giving them, I guess, a wide range and building on top of not just injectables but other offerings.
Yeah, I think our first encounter, I could be a little bit off, but I think you might have reached out to me and said, hey, I'm from this company. Have you ever used this brand before? And I hadn't. And I am pretty sure it was while I was still reasonably early on building my team. So I think again, like I said, was tunnel vision, and I hadn't really explored other areas or other products, anything like that, because I was it felt safe with what I knew. And you came in with this whole nother range and just like opened my eyes up to, in this industry, what I could be using, what I could try, something that I want to try, and then maybe adapt that into one pathway of my treatment plans. But it's so funny to think back at, before using those products, I was very narrow-minded just because that's what I'd learned, that was what I was comfortable with. But I guess there's, an element of that. You do need to have trust and be comfortable in what you're using. It's just you introduced me to a different range.
Yeah,
I guess.
You. Well, I think it's just being authentic and believing in what you're doing and the treatments or the products that you're providing. And it could be as simple as trying another product that may provide additional treatment offerings as opposed to what the range that you're currently using. So there might be skin boosters that your current supplier may not have, or you weren't using. So then that opens up that conversation.
What's a lesson you learned the hard way when you owned your own clinic? One maybe that no one warned you about.
Underestimating just how much of your soul that you invest into your business, and how personal you take things. It's your baby. And I think when at the start, it overwhelmed me. I got upset at, my first bad Google review and, or the first client complaint. Those things I really took to heart, because you are so invested in this business. So I think as you go along, as you build up that confidence, I think those things you sort of tend to go with your head and less with your heart, I think. So
I say to people all the time, now that I have my face on social media a little bit more, obviously with the podcast, things like that, I don't care what people say about my face. They can say whatever they want. I've got thick skin. I don't care. Say something bad about my face, don't care. Say something bad about my work, it's really upsetting. Like it like you said, it's quite personal, and you take those sorts of things really personal. But I think as you grow, you realise they will happen in any industry you're in. You will have people, not necessarily people just come for you for the sake of it, but you will also have things that you can then grow and learn from. And that's where I find myself growing. If ever we sort of have any sort of complication or anything like that, I go, okay, well, I'm learning from this. What could I have done differently? What can I put in place to stop this from happening again? Lessons learned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's how you deal with those issues when they arise. So, and I think, particularly with client complaints, bad Google reviews, get them in, talk about it. And I think it's the way that it's managed, I think is really important in moving forward.
It's not necessarily the reason why people are complaining, it's how you then manage that afterwards that makes 100%. You a good person. So how do you stay ahead in such a rapidly evolving industry within the aesthetics industry?
Definitely investing in self-education. So I attend a lot of conferences. I listen to podcasts. I attend, training events. So all of that, I think, helps you stay connected with what's, trending, what's going on. And I think really investing in, community, getting out there, talking to, clinics, having really good relationships, particularly also with suppliers as well, so people who are within the industry, and and just keeping the communication open, but definitely investing in your own education, making sure that you're upskilling is really important.
And you'd hope that you'd find that exciting in the fact that things are evolving, things are changing, there's always new things coming in. That's kind of exciting,
so rapidly. It is, I can't keep up.
What next?
What next? Exactly. So there's lots of trends.
To be honest, that's probably something I struggle with, is having the time to look around and explore. Being so busy, like I said, you're sort of narrow-minded, you're almost waiting for the opportunities to come to you. That's something probably I've worked on a little bit, but I can see that as a business owner, that's probably something that I struggle with, because I'm safe, I'm busy, things are working, but what's next?
Yeah, and I think that is that whole sort of level of, I guess, FOMO. What's that clinic doing?
Yeah.
Who's got that new product?
Yeah.
And I think that can be overwhelming for businesses. And I think, competition is healthy, and I was super competitive. I think I remember, every morning waking up and I just, who's on the top of the ladder? If you're not first, you're last. And so it does get a little bit overwhelming and sometimes detrimental, I think. So staying in your own lane, know what you're good at, focusing on offerings that you do really well, and then build on top of that. I think a lot of clinics, they tend to, they want to run before they can walk, and I have to be offering everything to everyone.
Yeah. Saturate the
and
offerings.
I think it's important to just know what you're good at, get comfortably good at a good couple of offerings, and then building on top of that when the time's right.
Well, what common mistakes do you see that new clinic owners are making, and how do you reckon they can avoid them?
I think underestimating the cost of actually starting up a business. I think, there's this sort of perception that, owning a clinic is just a license to print money, and it's fun and I can do that. But it's really, I think, businesses need to ensure that they're managing their cash flow. I think cash flow is critical to a business. I also think just making sure, I always had a decent buffer in the bank account, and I had a dollar amount that I wouldn't go under, just to make sure for any unforeseen, things that happen, if a laser broke or you had to invest in, new equipment, you made sure that you had that little slush fund there. So and I think having that financial stress can then lead into how you operate your business. If you have that financial stress, I think then people might start to, sort of forcibly sell, and it's not, authentic, or they're pushing treatments on, maybe, and I think it's subconscious. I don't think you necessarily do it intentionally, but I think, if you've got that financial concern, I think that can impact how you operate your business.
I know as an injectable clinic, we obviously have found, since I opened my business, which was about 5 years ago, things with the restrictions have tightened a lot. So opening my business 5 years ago, things were a lot more lax. It was easier to build a client base, to build that business. Now I'm finding, I think, less and less people starting businesses, probably from the financial side of it, and also the requirements are so, not competitive, they're so difficult to just step into it, which in a sense is good to not oversaturate the market, but hard for people wanting to start a business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what I find is a lot of clinics don't even have a business plan in place. I think, gone are the days where just a beautiful aesthetic or, a beautiful clinic, you open the doors and, people come in. It's not like that. You need to have structure and strategies in place. And even in the fresh State of Aesthetics report that came out, which had made, amazing insights into it, there's, only 18% of people actually had a strategy in place, and over 60% weren't confident in, financial planning. So that's huge. And that was over, I think, 160 plus clinics that Fresh surveyed. So it was a really interesting, it's natural to me, but I was really blown away and surprised by how many people just don't have that in place. So I think those two things, a marketing strategy and a business plan, are crucial. And it's super. I don't mean easy, but there's AI. There are people that you can lean into. Whether it's another clinic or you get yourself a business coach. So there's people out there that you can outsource. So trying not to do everything yourself. I think people. Because it's their baby, they find it hard to delegate. But you really need to access that information. There's a lot of information out there that can help, businesses. So,
finance, money, numbers, things like that are not my strength. So I've found at first it was me managing things because it was such a small scale. But as you start to expand marketing, everything like that, all the costs involved, you have to have support. Like, I can't keep my head on what's going out and what's going in, as well as treat and care for patients. My husband has a lot of input with things like that because he actually enjoys that side of things.
So does
I'm
mine.
just like, yours, it's all yours. Not for me.
Yeah, and I think that was the easier thing, when I owned my business, I had all of that support with Laser Clinics. Everything was done. The marketing was done. I didn't have to think about that side of things. And yet still it was really tough to run a business. So, and with all of that support. So I understand how hard it must be not having those things in place for these clinics that are just starting up.
But also how important it is.
Yeah,
you can see
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
And it's not just about, you've got to know your numbers, but it's not just about revenue, as you say. It's, patient acquisition. It's cost of goods sold. It's, it's not just a matter of purchasing product and that's, that's it. You need to look at how much does that treatment room cost and I guess, breaking it down into the nitty gritty, the cost of the injector that's in there, the, consumables and all of those things, you really need to have a good understanding of just how much, per treatment it's costing you.
So you've mentored so many clinics before, right? What's something you wish every new clinic owner knew before opening their doors?
Yeah, having a plan in place, so marketing and a business plan. Business is a roller coaster, and I think it's 24/7, and you would have felt that. You don't just waltz in at 8:30 and treat your patients and waltz out at 5:30. You might leave at 5:30, but then you've got to look at doing the pays and then doing things like podcasts and things like that. So it doesn't stop. Those things people don't tend to think of.
Building a strong team is so crucial. I am very lucky to have 3 of my staff members that I've handpicked. We've built a strong team with them. What qualities do you look for when hiring staff?
Someone who I guess is invested in their journey, invested in their own self education, and I think having that curious intent, I think, and that sort of passion to grow. Because if they're invested in your business, then you need to invest back into them. So I think having that growth mindset is really important. Someone who can think quick on their feet and adapt, I think, is also really important because things don't always go, beautifully in a clinic. Things break down, and you need someone who's able to adapt and think quick on their feet for you. I think a good cultural fit is really important. I think, that can disrupt a team, particularly if there's not that good vibe, about them, I think. And I've made that mistake myself, hiring someone who is great on paper and have those technical skills, which equally are important, but just the wrong person, and they need to fit within the team, and that's not about hiring, I guess clones of, of one another. You need different personalities, and you equally need different strengths to make, your business work. So, and someone with, good communication as well, because they are going to have, difficult conversations that need empathy. So having, that good communication skill is really important.
I was lucky enough in a previous job in the hospital system to do a lot of recruitment in my managerial position. And I think that I took for granted the variety of personalities that you can get. So I didn't just hire nurses, but predominantly what I was hiring was nurses in that position. And I assumed that a nurse has done uni, they've had to show up for uni, so they are going to be reliable. They're going to have, enthusiasm. They're going to be overall the perfect fit for this position. And then you realise it's not that. Like, just because they've got that experience as a nurse or whatever doesn't mean that they're a good fit. Yeah. So I've been able to take that experience into my own business and I guess just not read a book by its cover, or not, like you said, just go by what their application says. You need to meet the person, ask them some challenging questions. Some of my recruitment, I've asked questions. Actually, no, all of my recruitment, I didn't give the applicants the questions before. Yeah. And I think that's something that I had happen to me in the hospital setting as well, which is quite daunting. But it makes you problem solve. It makes you critically think. So in a slightly uncomfortable position, like slightly uncomfortable environment, getting asked, how would you do this? That's part of it, is how you then, I would have people reply to the question, oh, I'm not prepared for this. And it's like, well, that's the point. Yeah. Like you can't be prepared for everything. Yeah. Yep. So that for me has worked really, like that's something I really appreciate from my past experience. Yeah. And it just shows, you can't preempt how someone's going to be just by their previous education and their experience. Yeah. You just got to meet them.
And I think when I first started out, my interview questions were pretty stock standard. And towards the end, or, a couple of years in, I was almost talking them out of the job than talking them into it, because I was firing all of these, really tricky questions that were really relevant to the role. And it's not all, great and exciting. There are things that are really important. So asking the right questions when you're hiring staff is critical to ensuring you've got the right fit.
And going off that, so you say the right fit, culture in the clinic is obviously so important. A positive clinic culture can make or break someone's experience or someone's journey, a patient's journey. How do you foster that positive, or how did you foster that positive?
Just investing, in their education, and I think leaning into their love language, which is weird, but but different people have different needs. And so one of my therapists, I guess trying to incentivise her money, monetary wise, she couldn't care less. She wanted to progress in her career. So for her, going from, a therapist, she wanted to then, move into a clinic manager, and how can I empower her and help her in her journey. So it's very different, when you get to know what makes them tick, and then, on the flip side, someone else, money, give me money. And so, they're really incentivised to do that way. So, getting to know, what makes them tick, I think, is really important. And just having that open communication, being transparent, I think being available, leading, from the top. If I was rocking to work late or, that type of thing, I think that rubs off on your team. So if they can see that you're committed to the clinic and to them, I think you get that back as well. So I was still, I was mopping my floors and being, on desk till 9 o'clock at night. So, and I expected, I guess the same from, my team, and they were willing to do that, for me. And I think getting them involved, as well in, I guess, maybe the financial side a little bit, because you're putting this target up on a board, and you would have that, you have to make money. And so I just remember sitting my team down and going, this is not a number. This is, rent is this much, staff salaries are, this much. So, and they were like, and it was this sort of moment where I kind of let them in a little bit on what I was looking at and what we had to, to make to break even.
And like,
so,
why?
Yeah,
why?
It wasn't just, a number that, I pulled out. It was, that's what we need and these are the reasons why. So, I think when you are aligning your whys together, I think that's when the magic happens.
Yeah. So what advice would you give someone to stepping into a leadership role, like you're saying, for the first time? Leadership
is learnt. It's not, it's not a title. Leading from the top down, I think leadership is about being authentic. I think also a really good combination of, that analytical skill and, that, I guess, that need for good culture and creating something together. So I think for me, leading a team is by example. It's having that, I guess, that open ear, that you're there to help support, you're there to help elevate them. And I think invested in your team as well makes, I guess, leadership important.
And leadership's not for everybody as well, like I think some people think there's these steps to progressing in life, one of those being a leader. Some people don't want that. Some people step away from that. So from my point of view, it's kind of like you said in terms of the love language. Are there some of my team members that want to progress up into a leadership position? Then if there is, that's when you nurture that and you grow with them. I think so anyway.
And I've made the mistake in the past putting someone in, that it was a very high seller into a leadership role, and it bit me in the bum because I just thought, if you're really good at your role and you're a high seller and high achiever, then you can step into, a leadership role and teach and guide and mentor the rest of the team. And it just, it didn't work because, they just weren't that natural leader. There's one thing to be, I guess, great at selling, and there's another to actually lead a team, for sure.
What's your take on the oversaturation of the industry? Like, do you think there's still room for new players to break through?
I absolutely think there is. I think there is definitely room for strategic players. I think there is definitely room for more players, and I think those clinics that are not trying to be everything to everyone and really just honing in on a really good skill, and I guess those that want to elevate the standard of the industry and share their knowledge. There is definitely room still for clinics, for sure.
How do you think clinics can adapt to emerging trends to stay competitive?
Again, staying on top of education, attending events is really important. I think leaning on the community, and I think that's one thing that is amazing about Fresh and their members. It is all about community, and I think I've been in these WhatsApp chats and things, and everyone really rallies together. There's always this constant does anyone know about this fridge thermometer and things like that, and people are genuinely they're wanting to help, and I think and they're wanting to elevate the standard of this industry.
I always think of it where I might get a client or a patient come to me after going somewhere else and having a bad experience, and it's quite upsetting for me because we should all be on the same playing field in that we all provide a treatment that is generally prescription It's heavily monitored, heavily restricted, regulated here in Australia, right? It's almost all the hard work is being done for us in terms of we are only allowed to use certain products that have the TGA have approved of it, everything like that. And yet people are still getting these really bad outcomes, essentially, right? Like bad experiences. And so when I hear that, I find that quite disappointing, because I assume we're all getting the same things. We're all educated the same. I think, like what you said, it's the effort you put into extra education, the time, all that sort of stuff, to make yourself be the best and do the best. There's always going to be varied outcomes, but I think the customer can always sense when there's the lack of authenticity, lack of knowledge, and just poor customer service as well, I think is probably something I hear a lot of. So.
Yeah. And I think it's also, and again, because we're not able to, see anyone's, pricings as well. There are a lot of people who, are pricing themselves too low or pricing themselves too high, and not in accordance to their level of expertise. and knowledge. So it's really, tricky for people out there, because they don't know until they go into that consult what they're getting. And I guess you would assume, because you adhere to a high level of compliance and regulation, and you're educated, and you value knowledge and forever sort of reinvesting back into you kind of expect that everyone's doing the same, but they're not. They're not.
So what's next for you in the career journey? You've obviously just landed this new job.
Yeah.
Are you going to stick with it for a bit? Because I hope that we get to see you a lot more often.
Of course. I'm just really excited and invested in helping clinics and our members grow, and really delving deep into I guess already the analytics that you guys have got available to you. And I know that being able to support businesses, I get a lot of enjoyment out of that, and and I can't help but help clinics and helping them grow. So I'm just excited to start on this journey based on all of the experience that has come before that. So
well, I'm excited to see more of you.
You surely will.
Well, Aniella, thank you so much for sharing your journey and insights with us today. Your experience and wisdom are truly inspiring. To our listeners, if you're looking to elevate your clinic or just starting out in the aesthetics industry, take a page from Aniella's book. Stay curious, stay committed, and don't be afraid to evolve. Until next time on the Blume Edit. This is the Blume Edit, unfiltered, unscripted and unapologetic. Subscribe now and tune in weekly.